Hey everybody, Professor Haystacks here again. Today I've taken to wearing a necktie which almost but not quite blends in with my shirt, thus making it something of a fashion no-no. At least so I am told. Today we will be reviewing The Fault in Our Cutie Marks and Viva Las Pegasus. Viva Las Pegasus. Doesn't quite work, does it? Regardless, doubleheader, partly because it takes a long time to edit these, partly because I don't have much to say, and partly because I have conventions coming up where I am giving presentations that I have to prepare, and I've been writing fan fiction. Check out my fan fiction channel. And moving along, the first thing of The Fault in Our Cutie Marks is that it is probably a reference to the book/film The Fault in Our Stars, which is itself derived from Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where, I can't remember the character's name, says, the fault is not in our stars, dear Brutus, but in ourselves that we are underlings. It's not having much to do, it doesn't have much to do with the episode, it's just a cute little reference. Now, the first thing is that Gabby the Griffin is something that would be called a Wunderkind in German. That is a wonder child, a child prodigy who's good at pretty much everything. Now, Gabby admittedly appears to be a little older. She may be the equivalent of like 17, 18, so maybe not a kid strictly in that respect. But she is good at pretty much everything we see her try to do. This is something that can occur in real life, but it's extremely rare even with a population of 7 billion to draw on. So in a much smaller population seen in Equestria, it should be vanishingly rare, particularly among the griffins who seem to have a small overall population. Regardless, Wunderkind have a tendency to throw a monkey wrench into the story and to become what are called Mary Sue's, characters whom the plot revolves around to the exclusion of all other characters. They do avoid that pitfall here, partly because she's a one-off character. It is worth noting that they don't try anything purely intellectual, but she does things like potion making and baking that require a certain level of mental acumen to do well. But none of that gets her what she wants. If she had managed to get a cutie mark despite all of that, then she may have fallen into Mary Sue territory, but that was not the solution. Now, while it is not my field, we see here that there is either a paleontologist or an anthropologist. The skull she digs up looks like it could be the pony equivalent of a Neanderthal, which would be under anthropology. If it's some sort of dinosaur-like thing, then it would be paleontology. Regardless, this indicates that that field does exist in Equestria. That's another science that we now know they have. It'd be interesting that, first of all, she found it in her backyard buried not that deep. The fact that that was even possible kind of suggests that their paleontology field likely isn't terribly well developed. Anthropology is one thing, because humans will throw stuff any old place, but for bones to fossilize, they have to be under specific conditions, and thus paleontologists tend to have a general idea of where they might find fossils. It's not exact. It is still possible to make random finds like that, but just the fact that no one even expected it is something. Her parents, of course, seeing these skull and crossbones, she could have been a pirate burying treasure, or a murderess digging a hole to put the bodies in, or have something to do with poison. I mean, digging a hole wouldn't really relate to that, but a skull and crossbones can be a symbol of poison. So, maybe she was going to be a chemical engineer. But it goes with paleontologist. That was, anyway, it's an interesting character. I've seen a bit of buzz about her online. Be nice to see her again later, maybe just in the background. I don't think she's been seen in class. Now, next, as you can hopefully see here, they at one point go and ask Twilight about cutie mark magic. Twilight reminds them of the previous time they tried that, like when Apple Bloom used Heart's Desire and got cutie pox. And there was, of course, in the first episode with the CMC where Twilight tried to force a cutie mark to appear on Apple Bloom, and it didn't really work. But there have been 2 semi-successful cutie mark related spells. The one in Magical Mystery Cure, which admittedly Twilight cast purely on accident, and it altered people's memories, so not really a valid solution. But Starlight invented a way of removing a pony's cutie mark and putting a equal sign in its place. If those 2 components were separable, she could conceivably have given Gabby an equals cutie mark, although I'm not certain what would have happened in that case, if that would have suppressed her abilities or not. She has a lot of abilities to suppress. Another possibility is that same sort of spell could have been used to remove a cutie mark from one pony and put it on a different creature. Regardless, the fact is that Starlight Glimmer is the cutie mark magic expert for all of Equestria and possibly their entire planet. We don't see enough outside of Equestria to really say that. But she would have been the person to ask, and she supposedly lives with Twilight. It seemed a bit odd that they didn't show her. Could have been a time constraint. I wrote up a quick little fanfic where they go and ask her, and it doesn't change the overall plot because either giving her someone else's cutie mark or giving her an equal sign are probably not valid solutions to the overall problem, even if that was something Starlight was willing to do, which she might not be. Well, that's pretty much all here. One final comment, though. They ultimately give Gabby basically wooden cutie marks. One has to wonder if they have some sort of tattooing process in Equestria. If they do, you could give her a tattoo that looks like a cutie mark. I mean, that would be something. All right, moving right along, we have next Viva Las Pegasus. Now, I do want to say I really liked this episode. The mystery component of it and the sort of drama component of it played very well. And while in most mystery dramas, I find that I can see the solution well before even supposedly genius characters like Adrian Monk, because the character can't actually be any smarter than the writer. So there's a bit of problem there sometimes. I mean, you can get a bunch of writers together and work something out that's clever, but then they're trying not to, I don't know, in their efforts to make Adrian Monk reasonable, they often had him overlook really, really obvious things, particularly in the last season. But I digress. In this episode, I actually did not see the solution until just before they explained it with the ponies, and I think Applejack, at least, had started to suspect before that point. Possibly Fluttershy as well. But I saw it basically about one scene before the ponies definitively saw it, when they went to the third person and found out that the third pair was also fighting and considering something that would threaten Gladmane's business. So, overall, well done mystery. Good build-up. Now, once we saw Flim and Flam fighting, I knew they probably weren't going to be the culprits, although I was a little worried they might be. Regardless. Now, Gladmane is potentially a reference to the phrase glad hand. To glad hand someone is to greet in an overly friendly or exuberant manner in order to curry favor with them, often used to apply to politicians. It usually has negative connotations like kiss up. Consequently, I think Gladmane is a reference to that because he does come across as overly friendly, and it is part of a attempt to curry favor, in some cases underhandedly by undermining others. Now, Lost Pegasus looks like it is probably on clouds. There have been other sources outside the show that indicate that it is in some sort. But unlike Cloudsdale, it doesn't move around. It's pretty much always in the same place. In the official map, we see that the equivalent of Hollywood, I forget what it was called, is nearby. But this implies that there's at least some ability to put non-cloud heavy buildings on clouds, and that if this is done, other ponies can walk on them. Cloudsdale doesn't do this, probably historical reasons, and also the fact that they have to move. But we see an interesting thing in that, much like the Hollywood Hills, that's actually Los Angeles, Las Pegasus is positioned near some mountains, and on the map we see that it appears to have clouds, but they're interrupted in a way that Cloudsdales aren't. So potentially, Las Pegasus could be built on mountaintops. I'm hoping you're going to be seeing some things beside me that kind of make sense of what I'm saying. This would mean that we could have the heaviest buildings, some of the big casinos and such, built on mountaintops, possibly with permanent cloud pillars as additional support, and then bridges built over them in what is generally a cloud bank, but otherwise empty space, and so non-Pegasi could not walk between the buildings without the ramps there. If there are cloud pillars, they're likely of a sort that are to support the buildings and structures. This is just speculation. They would have to be fixed in place to do so, I'm guessing, which would be one reason why it doesn't move. The other being so that earth ponies and unicorns can always find the darn place. Although there's something to be said for a traveling casino. I mean, there are riverboat casinos. An interesting point here, and this is science related, although we don't see it in the show. The area underneath Las Pegasus would be perpetually shadowed. Now, there are deep mountain valleys in the real world that are perpetually shadowed, and stuff grows there. Mushrooms like shadowed places, for instance. And in thick forests, the floor will often be perpetually shaded. But this area would not have been that way all the way through prior to the construction of Las Pegasus. Now, it's possible they just caused massive ecological disruption. It's possible that light is somehow magically channeled through the clouds. Or most likely possibility is that they moved the critters that need more light and plants out from under the area before they built it. But at any rate, the remaining ecosystem left beneath Las Pegasus would be fairly unique and probably quite interesting, as it would be stuff that's surviving in perpetual shadow beneath a major metropolitan area, or at least a metropolitan area. There is a system somewhat analogous, although it's not shaded to quite the same extent, in a garden beneath the Arecibo radio telescope in Puerto Rico. I've not been there myself. I've seen pictures, and I've worked with people who have been there. The Arecibo telescope is actually a wire mesh, which means it only blocks a certain percentage of the sunlight from hitting the area beneath it, and water just goes right through. But this means that it has a reduced sunlight beneath it and a predictable water distribution as stuff rolls down the dish and drips out through the mesh. This makes it a very unique area for growing plants, and there's an experimental garden underneath there that, what would it be? I'm not sure what the scientist's name would be. Ecologist, biologist, something. It's in the broad field of biology, but I don't know what plantology. That's probably wrong. At any rate, there's scientists that grow stuff under there and study it, how it goes in that unique environment. Very interesting. All right, last bit, which I have to show the clip here from for it to make sense. And here we go.
While this establishment undergoes a slight change in management, my brother and I want to assure you that it remains the pinnacle of Las Pegasus entertainment, which is why we invite each and every one of you to experience the wonder of the Pony Fantastique Theater at half the normal cost of admission.
And while you're appreciating this historic venue, totally devoid of performance of any kind, we invite you to use the wonder of your own imaginations to fill the space at no additional charge.
Okay, now that was the closing gag where the Flim Flam brothers say that you get to use your imagination to picture a show free of charge. Now, of course, paid historical tours are a real thing. There are houses you can pay to go in and have someone talk about. Regardless, I found this joke in this episode hilarious the first time I heard it. And, but anyway, it's quite funny. While historical tours are a thing, the Flim Flam brothers are pricing it as if it were a show, or I assume so. There's no exact conversion between bits and dollars. And thus, in that sense, it's a hustle. It's not actually an illegal one. I mean, they did tell you exactly what you were paying for, and not in any tricky wording either, just good salesmanship. In Las Pegasus, which, thing of Las Vegas, they can probably make a pretty decent living. Not to get too political, but flim and flam for princesses. Make Equestria great again. Regardless, they can make money semi-legitly in Las Pegasus if they really want to. Now, their previous endeavors have been shady. I guess their bit with Sweet Apple Acres was technically legal, but very shady. The contract they were trying to force them into was very one-sided, and there was no legitimate reason for the apples to accept. Should just let market forces play out. And, of course, in their second episode, they were just committing fraud. But anyway, they seem to have something of a pathological need to hustle and or scam, which is what they did in the first episode they appeared in, when they really didn't have to. They had a very remarkable machine. It's just that they felt they had to not just make money off the machine, but make money by hustling and defrauding innocent farmers. At any rate, here, they were hustling the ponies by selling a tour as a show, but they were honest about it, so I have to give them credit. They weren't doing anything particularly wrong as far as I can tell. So as long as they can suppress their urge to scam people for no good reason, they could make a good living there. This does mean we probably won't see them again for a while. Probably at least 2 seasons. I mean, if we get a 7th season, I hate to jinx it. But making a big budget movie that would be advertised and shown in theaters is likely to get fans into the franchise, and thus it doesn't really make sense to end a franchise with a theatrical film. Indeed, the first My Little Pony series sort of began with a theatrical film. There were 2 TV specials before that, but the theatrical film was what kicked off the main recurring series. Regardless, the point being, not sure if we'll see Flim and Flam again for quite some time. If we see them, probably won't be till at least 2018, because that's likely when we'll get a season 7 if we do. Anyway, that is all for today. Once again, I'm Professor Haystacks, wearing a fashion-inappropriate necktie. Good night, and drive safely. My little pony, gotta do a longer version this time. Make up some words here. Got to go 55 seconds. My little pony, do, let's stretch this one out. My little pony, still not filled up the time yet. Do, don't know the words. My little pony, oh look, I've still not filled the time yet. My little pony, and now we are finished. Not quite, still a few seconds.